Sexed, revenge porn, courtship disorders, and paraphilias. This is kind of an ugly chapter, but it's one that we need to talk about. And this is really close, can have a lot to do with what's going on with missing and murdered indigenous women, in that they are meeting people online and potentially they're being drawn away from their families by people on the internet, and it may be the internet that is the problem. So let's go ahead and talk about this. I know some of this stuff is kind of raw and it's kind of difficult to talk about, but I think it's important. It's important that we recognize these things as problems, and that potentially, if we ever get into a situation where we're looking at someone who has disappeared, that this is a potential problem that they had. So we would be able to look at we would be able to investigate whatever is going on, and with a realistic eye. A lot of times when somebody disappears, we say, well, they would never do that. They would never do this. They would never do something else. But the reality may be that someone may be drawn into this type of a lifestyle, or a potentially a fetishistic lifestyle. So we need to be realistic about this. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Like I said, it's kind of raw. It's kind of difficult to talk about, but I do think that it's important as far as the potentiality of causing a problem. Social media has fundamentally reshaped the relationship between not only humans and technology, but also the very nature of pre-industrial and even primordial behaviors that have otherwise proven stable for centuries, even millennia. And we're talking about sex here. We're talking about the concept of sex and the concept of courtship. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the case of human sexuality, where a technologically determined paradigm shift with far-reaching socioeconomic and psychological implications may prove to have significant long-term evolutionary consequences. And we don't really know. The difference between people in the United States and the people in Japan. Just as an example, the people in the United States, a very small percentage of people who are virgins into their 30s. In Japan, the number is 25 is over 25%. One quarter of the population are virgins when they enter their 30s. So this is not the same. We're looking at different cultures where these types of this type of behavior is changing. So what was something that everyone did at a fairly young age. They're in your teens and 20s. There has been a paradigm shift, especially in Japan, where people are staying virginal into their 30s. The post-millennial generation, understood as those born after 1992, which is most of you, have been confirmed as the least sexual generation on record. Attitudes toward positive sexuality, ideas related to body image and what exactly constitutes appropriate courtship practices have all been fundamentally redefined. And this is something that we need to recognize. I'm an old person. I'm in my 70s. So when I was young, when I was your age, when I was in my teens, it was natural for people, as soon as they graduated from high school, to try to find someone to marry. Women were getting married right out of high school. Men were getting married as soon as they found a steady job. And at that time, of course, there were a lot of manufacturing jobs in the United States. And for that reason, of course, the sexuality was a lot different. I had my first child when I was 19 years old. I turned 20 the next month, but she was my child was still born when I was only 19 years old. And this was relatively normal. I wasn't the first person in my high school class to have a child. There were other individuals that right out of high school, some of them less than 9 months after they graduated from high school, they had their first child. Technology, and by extension social media, has the ability to irreparably damage healthy relationships and intimacy to the point that it not only imperils the ability to form lasting relationships and properly transition between life stages, but also poses significant dangers to others in the way of malignant and often violent sexual preferences shaped online and in the absence of social cues. Now remember, before these were only ideas that people had. Now with the explosion of pornography on the internet, you can find videos about just about anything, just about anything. So if you have any type of a fetish that is not that isn't reproductive, then potentially this will be a problem. Let me give you a quick example. Let me give you a quick example of a situation that I am aware of that has completely changed how this individual had to live their lives. Um, Once upon a time, I had a girlfriend. This is before I got married, and we parted ways, but we continued to communicate. She eventually, after several attempts at romance, she found an individual that she wanted to marry. Both of them were recovering alcoholics. Everybody was happy. They were both recovering alcoholics. They were going to get together. They were going to get married. They were going to have a family. The problem was that he was a long distance trucker. And one of the things that he did was masturbate while he was driving his truck. And that was one of the ways that he stayed awake. If he got tired, he would stimulate himself, and then he would be able to drive for hours longer. So he was maintaining this behavior for hours on end. So when it came time for he and his fiancee to have sex, he couldn't ejaculate. He couldn't ejaculate because he had trained himself. He had conditioned himself to to have erections that without ejaculation. And because of that, she called me on the phone. She said, "What should I do? Is there anything I can do?" And of course, there wasn't anything that she could do because this was his mindset. There was just nothing that they potentially could have done. That is. So when we're talking about people's fetishes, people's fantasies, sexual fantasies, potentially what we're talking about are individuals that normal intercourse, genital intercourse between two individuals is not going to get the individual to orgasm, to the point of orgasm. That's what I'm talking about. And so we're looking at exactly the same thing when we're talking about some of these paraphilias, some of these fetishes that people maintain. It may be a case where um, they normal human sexual interactions where where the male impregnates the female, that isn't as common now as it used to be once upon a long time ago. That's what we're really talking about. I hate to be as blunt as that, but that's really what we're talking about. Declining interest in real intimacy among young adults mirrors other more concerning trends with respect to the normalization of deviant and often violent erotic attachments to unusual and often illegal people, places, objects, or situations. These attachments are what are known as paraphilias, literally meaning beyond love. Paraphilia, para means beyond, philia means love, with over 500 such disorders currently tabled in the literature. 500 different paraphilias are out there. Cyberbullying is more than just a nuisance or an issue of mental health and self-respect. In reality, it is rooted in aberrant sexual fantasy and can be correlated with any number of other high-risk disorders, including pedophilia and sexual sadism. So when people are doing whatever these people are doing, uh, their cyberbullying, when they are doing their cyberbullying, in reality, they're living out fantasies. They have ideas about things in their minds. The ubiquity of online pornography and its ability to be accessed and consumed in real time through mobile devices and shared through social media has created newly reinvented attempts to address the enormous reach of the porn industry. Over 40 million Americans visit pornographic websites on a daily basis. 40 million Americans. Over 35% of all internet downloads globally consist of pornographic content. Over 25% of all search engine queries globally involve explicit or pornographic terms. Every 39 minutes, a new pornographic video is being produced and uploaded to the internet in the United States alone. These are our American pornographic videos. Over 1/3 of regular pornography consumers are now females, including teenagers. 1/3 of all pornography consumers are female, whereas before we thought it was males. We thought it was almost exclusively males. Now we know that 1/3 of the people that view pornography are female. American pornography sites get more unique visitors per month than Netflix, Twitter, and Amazon combined. Over 200,000 Americans self-identify as pornography addicts. They can't help themselves. They can't stop. They have to keep watching. The American pornography content aggregator Pornhub, a site that averages nearly 3 million unique visitors per hour, 24 hours a day, has spearheaded an initiative in which it publicly discloses the most searched pornographic keywords or most viewed categories by region within the United States on an annual basis, generating a national snapshot of the dominant fixations and preferences for stimuli on a state-by-state basis. The search trends present researchers with access to large data sets on dominant paraphilias that in some cases seem to have very clear cultural and geographic boundaries. And I'm going to show you a state-by-state breakdown of what the favorite keyword is in that state. And here you go. If we count the number of purple states where lesbian is the most searched for term, we come up with 30. There are 30 states in the United States where lesbian is the most sought after keyword. Another keyword that is dominant is stepsister. People want to fantasize about their stepsister. And the third one is stepmom. Stepmom. How many stepmoms do we have? 5. 5 stepmoms. 5 states where stepmom is the preferred keyword, and 4 where cartoon is the preferred keyword. As weird as that may seem, there you go. So what do we have here? Fairly common. There's only 5 or 6 different words. Ebony, which is another word for black, and there's black in Louisiana. Ebony in Delaware. Yeah, it's Delaware. Anyway, there you go. Keywords. Today, paraphilia denotes an erotic or amorous relationship to someone or something beyond acceptable social norms. This includes an attraction to, interest in, or attachment to people, places, objects, and situations or ideas that are forbidden by conventional society or otherwise marginalized as fringe behavior. And of course, We can see it right here. Stepsister and stepmother. You wouldn't want to have sex. It is taboo to even conceive of having sex with your stepmother or your stepsister, or with cartoons for that matter. Um, and the other one is, of course, lesbian is the most common, including in both Arizona and New Mexico, Utah and Colorado. So there you go, whole four corners. Many paraphilias can be controlled and exercised discreetly between consulting adults, or are otherwise exploratory and transitory, and come and go during a lifetime, especially during adolescence. You get some really strange fantasies, really strange ideas from during adolescence. The reality is, however, that where are they getting these ideas? Where are they coming up with these strange paraphilias, these strange ideas about what sex is supposed to be like? Well, they get it off the internet. This may also explain why consumption of a wide cross-section of pornography is most common among 18 to 24-year-olds in all countries tracked. And that includes Europe, that includes Asia, and the Americas, of course. Online pornography has the ability to actually normalize, or at least destigmatize, what have been traditionally held to be highly aberrant and even dangerous paraphilias. One of them, of course, is cannibalism, and that's why I have this this picture here. This is the giant in Jack and the Beanstalk salting Jack and looking to see what is the best part to eat. Of course, he's a giant and Jack is a tiny little thing. So that wouldn't be cannibalism. But cannibalism is one of the things that we're looking at. These sites are on the internet. Anaphylorastia. Anaphylorastia is a paraphilia that describes an erotic fixation on or fantasy attachment to the ravaging, defiling, or subordination and humiliation of a sexual partner. This behavior is concerning, overrepresented in any number of pornographic productions featuring simulated gang rape, forced oral sex, and any number of violent and degrading sex acts. And this isn't actually what this is. They're actually trying to help her up, but it almost looks like they're not. Anaphylorastia. Blastolagnia, a paraphilia that describes an erotic fixation on or fantasy attachment to young and sexually inexperienced, typically virgin, teenaged females. This paraphilia is also known as ephebophilia and the Lolita syndrome. Pornographic productions featuring teen and stepdaughter themes fall squarely within this category. And as we saw, stepdaughter was very popular in select states. Garment fetishism, paraphilia that describes an erotic fixation on or fantasy attachment to specific and often unusual pieces of clothing or accessories. Countless pornographic films cater to this paraphilia, with varying focus ranging from the use of stockings and garters to more atypical garments such as hats and gloves as the subject of sexual encounters on camera. Leptosadism is a paraphilia that describes an erotic fixation on or fantasy attachment to inflicting pain. It is a mild version of traditional sadism in which the viewer enjoys watching a subject struggle or scream, but with no permanent injury or disfigurement. An unsettling proliferation of mainstream productions involve gagging, confinement, and mild forms of sexual torture to cater to viewers with this paraphilia. Leptosadism. Mixoscopia is a paraphilia that describes an erotic fixation on or fantasy attachment to watching one's spouse be sexually dominated by another partner, usually a stranger, typically taking the form of a cuckolded husband. Once again, we see an unusual number of productions with elaborate narratives in which a husband is forced to watch or simply asked to watch his spouse be sexually dominated by a typically younger and more virile man, suggesting that his paraphilia may be more common than previously speculated. Novercomania is a paraphilia that describes an erotic fixation on or fantasy attachment to one's stepmother. And of course, we saw the states where stepmother was the primary keyword. This paraphilia accounts for the widespread popularity of stepmom as a search string across the United States and as the dominant online visual stimuli in 4 states. That's actually 5 states based on the Pornhub metrics. Reticism is a paraphilia that describes an erotic fixation on or fantasy attachment to feet, stockings, or shoes. This fetish is prominently represented across many subgenres of pornography in terms of its being embedded imagery in other pornographic subgenres, and where, like garment fetishism, we see a recurring fixation on high-heeled shoes, stockinged feet, or bare feet as the chief visual stimulus and focal point of the film. Somnophilia, paraphilia that describes an erotic fixation on or fantasy attachment to people sleeping. This behavior has seen a concerning yet increased presence in mainstream erotica, where pornographic productions feature storylines involving the stalking, fondling, and by definition sexual assault of performers posing as sleeping females. Stigmatophilia is a paraphilia that describes an erotic fixation on or fantasy attachment to tattoos, piercings, or other bodily ornamentations that denote pain and permanence and which have a certain narrative value. In recent years, much like reality television's para-celebrity as an emissary of disordered narcissism, we see how pornography performers are driving trends in extreme piercing and tattooing to the point that it is changing everyday aesthetic norms. Urophilia is a paraphilia that describes an erotic fixation on or fantasy attachment to urine. It describes the rather crass use of golden shower films that have long been a staple of more deviant mainstream pornography, and where a performer is urinated on by a sex partner at some point in the sequence. Internet pornography has reset the practice, mutually affecting both females and males, who, in being inundated with industry standards of beauty, bodily ornamentation, and sexual identity, have begun to exhibit a specific subtype of body dysmorphia, a disordered and distorted perspective of one's body, now known as social physique anxiety. In other words, everybody has to look the same. Everybody has to look ripped, or everybody has to look beautiful, or everybody has to have large breasts, or everybody has to have blonde hair, or everybody, whatever. While body dysmorphic disorder is linked with maladaptive eating and exercise practices, ranging from anorexia and bulimia nervosa that have severe medical implications, social physique anxiety tends to be more subtle and insidious, but no less damaging over the long term. It's being associated with clinical depression, anxiety, and negative sexuality. Exposure to pornography among both genders and among the heterosexual, homosexual, and LGBTQ++ viewers is a leading contributor to social physique anxiety with pornography performers, and by extension the studios employing them, having become to some extent the arbiters of not only attractiveness, but also how to perform one's sexuality. It is this aspect of performance that underlies the social or public component of this form of bodily anxiety. In other words, you watch a pornographic film, you say to yourself, well, I don't look like that, so therefore I can't be sexual, or you watch a pornographic video and you say, well, that's the way I have to perform sex. This is the way I have to react to sex because that's what I saw in this film. Higher amounts of pornography consumed are strongly correlated with increased body dissatisfaction and elevated social physique anxiety. Even among adolescents who, it has been suggested, have undertaken internet pornography as a rite of passage and a safe mechanism for sexual experimentation and curiosity, have been shown to develop early onset feelings of sexual objectification, especially adolescent females, associated with high risk sexual behaviors to abate feelings of inadequacy. And so they're watching these videos, just saying, this is what I have to do to perform correctly. And then, of course, it seems to go beyond anything that we have seen before. So while males tend to internalize their bodily dissatisfaction following regular consumption of pornography, females tend to externalize their social physique anxiety through extrinsically motivated behaviors that mimic pornographic performances and integrate dominant pornographic themes and aesthetic norms. And that's one of the reasons why I am showing you a picture of Miley Cyrus. This thing about her sticking out her tongue, which looks sick to me. It looks like she's got yeast infection on her tongue. I've always thought her tongue was an odd color, but that's the way it looks. Anyway, she's a perfect example of this. Why in the world are you doing all these sexual things? Why you have a video about sitting naked on a wrecking ball? Why in the world are you doing these things? You know, what are you doing? And actually, lately, since she married one of the Hemsworths, and then they got a divorce, and now she's feeling a little bit different about herself. She admitted that she has been depressed, and that's one of the reasons why she did some of the things that she did, some of the extreme things that she did. We see pornographic content that is initially created and exchanged consensually, later being misused for the purpose of either revenge or grooming. In each of these actions, the central motive differs fundamentally and has a distinct effect on the victim. In both cases, however, the term revenge porn has been applied by the general public to describe the distributing phenomenon of repurposing images of an explicit or compromising nature to extort or humiliate or otherwise induce behavior from the subject of these images, the original sender, with the threat of making them public. And of course, then you can blackmail them and get things from them, potentially sexual, but possibly money, or you can get them to do things that they would otherwise refuse to do. Revenge porn and cyberbullying, including what is now known as doxing. And doxing, I keep looking doxing up because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me what it is. Anyway, doxing has to do with finding out embarrassing things about people from the internet and publishing it. That's what doxing is. Through social media, sites have a mutually paraphilic element that has until now gone unnoticed in terms of its being indicative of high-risk sexual deviance. Trafficking in the intimate images of others, whether initially received on a consensual basis or otherwise acquired through coercion or theft, is also often indicative of an underlying identity disturbance. An identity disturbance is a typically acute state of mind that mimics or serves as a precursor to borderline personality disorder, one typically brought on by a change in life circumstances or worldview that fundamentally reshapes a person's narrative perspective of themselves and their relationships. These types of narrative perspectives, particularly with respect to undertaking deviant or illegal activities, have been an area of growing interest among experts. This includes cases of serial offending, serial murder, serial rape, serial arson, etc., where studies carried out in the United Kingdom suggest that both during and after the commission of some of the most heinous crimes imaginable, serial offenders assign specific storylines, plotting, and character treatments to their actions, and victims that fall squarely within one of the four recurring archetypes the adventurer, the professional, the revenger, and the tragedian. These are all storylines that they apply to their activities. So when they see themselves preparing to burn down another building, they see themselves as the revenger, or as the professional doing his professional job, or as an adventurer like Indiana Jones. Or maybe it's a tragedy. I'm doing this because of some horrible thing that someone did to me, and now I'm punishing them. The revenger thing, the tragedian thing. So that's one of the things that is happening with these internet fantasies that people are maintaining. They have become serial something or others: serial rapists, serial murderers, serial arsonists, serial vandals. And they're doing it because it's an adventure. They are professionals. They create this story around it. And when they are having a crisis of identity, they will go out and they will do their thing. They will, murder, rape, vandalize, or commit arson. And this becomes their storyline that they tell themselves. The term revenge porn is most commonly used to describe the act of posting or the online distribution of sexually explicit images. In essence, the non-consensual production and distribution of pornography through the misuse of extant images. Often these same images depict an ex-partner with whom a romantic relationship has been ended less than amicably, and where the distribution of these intimate images that were at one time sent consensually are made public to humiliate or embarrass the original sender. And these are the states with anti-revenge porn laws: Wisconsin, Illinois. Arizona has it, and so does New Mexico, Texas, Utah, California, Hawaii, Colorado, Nevada, Oregon, Idaho, Washington, Alaska, Maine, Vermont, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C., Georgia, and Florida, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas. And the rest of the states don't have it, including Iowa. Iowa doesn't have an anti-revenge porn law. Such malicious behavior is alarmingly common. A survey of a national sample of 1,182 adults in the United States conducted by McAfee in 2012 found that 1 in 10 individuals have threatened to share intimate photos of their ex-partner through social media or email, while nearly 60% actually carried out their threats and published intimate and erotic images that had previously been shared privately. Revenge porn has been oversimplified in some circles and is quite clearly a paraphilic behavior and predictor of other dysfunctionality and predatory conduct. While a number of Western nations have in recent years amended their penal and criminal codes to include trafficking in intimate images, or revenge porn laws as they're colloquially known, as outlawed activity, any number of other pre-existing laws can also be violated through the posting of such images, especially if the individual is underage, which means that it's child porn, and you can really get in tons of problems by showing images of someone under the age, usually depending on the state, under the age of 18. One thing I didn't know, I just found this out last week. The legal age of consent in Japan is 13, yet we already know that 25% of all people over 30 are virgins in Japan. So it's not very common for 13-year-olds to be wandering around having sex with people. As any behavior or pattern of behaviors involves unsolicited and usually unwelcome act of exposing one's body and genitalia, the intention is to provoke reactions such as shock and fear from those who become a captive audience to such actions. The shock, panic, confusion, or awkwardness caused by such lewd acts in turn provides psychological or sexual satisfaction for the perpetrator. Exhibitionism in a digital context specifically refers to sexually revealing images of oneself placed online or distributed electronically. And this is an example. This is Miley Cyrus in her act. You can see her with fairly revealing clothing, sticking her tongue out. And this is her as Hannah Montana. You can see she has changed her image a lot. Such actions can admittedly be part of a lifestyle in which pornography and sexual disinhibition play an integral role, including invitations to meetings for sexual contact or as part of a courtship shaped through mobile and morally relative social media and dating applications such as Tinder that are ostensibly, at least initially, premised on casual sexual encounters and where such actions are not necessarily deemed taboo. This is a model. This lady was a model, and she decided to go online. She arranged for any number of men. She seduced all these men, or induced them to come to a park in New York City. All of them showed up at the same time. She had a stage set up. She had over 1,000 men that she had told that she would meet them in real life at that park at that time, and there were over 1,000 men there that she had induced to come to the park. Of course, she wasn't dating any of them. She referred to herself as a victim rather than that they were the victims. There are a total of 4 types of physical exhibitionists that have been proposed in the current peer-reviewed literature, namely the fantasizing exhibitionist, or a person obtaining sexual satisfaction from the mere thought of exposing themselves to unsuspecting persons, the pure exhibitionist, who exposes themselves from a distance and masturbates without coming into physical contact with his or her victim, the exclusive exhibitionist, or a person who cannot form a typical romantic relationship and engage in normal sexual intercourse, but can only achieve sexual gratification through exhibitionism, and then the exhibitionistic criminal who combines their exhibitionist tendencies with sexual crimes such as child molestation or rape, or progresses to it over time as they move into more serious attack paraphilias. Similarly, a person committing digital sexual exhibitionism, a 5th category that we propose can exist simultaneously with any 4 of the previously tabled typologies, and who targets unsuspecting victims, can also combine this behavior with similar offline activities. This is a joke. Streaking makes a comeback, but nobody notices because everybody's looking at their phones. Anecdotal accounts of males cultivating a reciprocal and flirtatious exchange with female users before immediately escalating to the sending of lewd images are so prevalent that a large number of female profiles now consist of disclaimers that serve as advanced reasonable notice of their disdain for exhibitionists. Facilities in Canada questioned a sample of 185 exhibitionists about their victims' preferred reaction. How would you have preferred a person to react if you were to expose your privates to him or her? The most common response was would want to have sexual intercourse, about 35.1%, followed by no reaction necessary at all, 19.5%, to show their privates also, 15.1%, like that's going to happen, admiration, 14.1%, and any reaction at all, 11.9%. Only very few exhibitionists chose anger and disgust, 3.8%, or fear, 0.5%. The leading motive for such acts as a delusional attempt at foreplay, indicative of a significantly disordered fantasy development, is in keeping with what we find in online versions. Once again, the exhibitionists, in their fundamental lack of refinement and confidence to appropriately develop a real intimate relationship, undertakes the known social and legal risks of exposing themselves as a form of courtship. There you go. More males than previously thought harbor some kind of exhibitionistic fantasy, and only the structure of offline society and associated criminal sanctions, such as being arrested and designated as a sex offender, dissuade them from acting out fantasies that can be realized with comparative immunity in social media spaces. So this is one of the things that we're discovering, and you never know. I mean, things are switching. Normal paraphilias. What we have identified as paraphilias in the past, we may have more, or some of the paraphilias that we have identified in the past may skyrocket in the future because of social media. Totally different idea than meeting someone in real life, as it were. Although grooming is an aberrant practice customarily refers to preparing a child for sexual contact without discovery, the concept can also loosely apply to the conditioning of any person to acquiesce to sexual advances, typically through a digital interface such as a chat room or other variation of social media. When a reluctant or inexperienced person is exposed to digital material of a sexual nature with the express intent to act as an encouragement, the perpetrator may be preparing the victim for an offline sexual encounter. Many abusers pose as someone else not only to conceal their true identity, but also to appear innocuous and gain the trust of the other person and make him or her feel comfortable. As such, the groundwork is laid for social media and chat room users to engage in online sexual exchanges or agree to meet in person. The sexual grooming of children is most prevalent among girls in the 13 to 14-year age range. However, any vulnerable person can be systematically befriended online with the aim of unwittingly allow abusive behavior or exploitation to occur later. It can also be used to lure victims in human trafficking, prostitution, drug smuggling, or pornography operations. I downloaded this because I remembered that when I was looking at all the Pornhub maps, this one showed that in Arizona and New Mexico, one of the key words that people were using, in this case, it's women. They're typing in Navajo as one of the major key words that they use. This is what women are typing. Now, if you thought that it's women that wanted to see lesbian themes, the reality is that it wasn't women that were doing that. It was men. Men wanted to see lesbians engaging in sexual intercourse. This is what women are typing in. And women in Arizona, the number one keyword that they use is Navajo. And the same thing in New Mexico. Now, of course, we can look at the rest of this. Some of these is really kind of weird. I don't understand why they're typing in Milwaukee in Wisconsin, and Detroit in Michigan, and Las Vegas in Nevada. I'm not exactly sure how that works. Boston in Massachusetts, Baltimore in Maryland. Was there another state that? Okay, and as you can see, the rest of it has to do with sex acts or something. Bedgasm, I had to look that one up. Bedgasm is where you get a euphoric feeling when you're really tired and you lay down in bed. That's what a bedgasm is. And that was kind of interesting. Anyway, so you can look all this stuff up. My Little Pony, I have no idea what that. I'm not exactly sure I want to know. Anyway. In some cases, predators posing as peers of the victims will solicit the sending of a sexually explicit image as a token of trust building or as a prelude to, like the digital exhibitionist, some type of courtship or foreplay. The sexually inexperienced teen or minor, and in some cases adults, may acquiesce in good faith, completely unaware of the true motivations. In reality, such exchanges are often used to facilitate future blackmail or to coerce the victim into further sex acts, up to and including being trafficked. Across the world, there are wildly inconsistent social media reporting requirements for convicted and registered sex offenders with a documented history of both child luring and criminal exhibitionism. Even in the United States, rules vary by region rather dramatically. The rules are also largely unenforceable in many cases. For instance, while sex offenders in some states must register their accounts with police to allow for third-party monitoring, and while Facebook prohibits access by convicted sex offenders, these restrictions are premised on voluntary reporting and transparency by high-risk deviants and paraphiliacs whose modus operandi is rooted in misrepresenting themselves online, usually as a child or a teen. Like all online groomers, the catfish, the term apparently having a strange commercial fishing origin, is able to socially engineer their targets and bend them to their will using an online variation of what has been historically known as gaslighting, or the ability to emotionally manipulate and control people by targeting their vulnerabilities. The online grooming process is employed for a wide range of purposes, from exploitation, including pedophilia, prostitution, human and drug trafficking, to recruitment for criminal activities. Victims are often lonely, marginalized, or already abused individuals, lured with flattery and promises of material items and escape. A recent U.S. study confirmed 22% of females under the age of 18 had sent explicit images and erotic, typically nude and posed self-portraits, either via social media or conventional text message to a crush or acquaintance. That's 22% of females have sent naked pictures of themselves to their boyfriends, while 11% have sent them via social media to an absolute stranger in what has been referred to as an epidemic in self-produced child pornography. 11%. That's 1 out of every 9. On the other hand, some scholars have suggested that the apparent psychopathology of such interactions aside, the practice is simply too widespread to be dismissed as inherently deviant and clearly affords senders some form of social capital or the ability to expand their network of friends, options of lovers, and generally enhance control over their environment. Sexters are media producers who use technology to amplify a certain sexual identity, one inarguably derived from online pornography, and one where the real-time communication offered by social media and mobile devices simulates the instant gratification offered by online pornography. The terms of how sexting enables the identification, selection, and pursuit of specific sexual partners, and how social media and pornography converge in a general sense for this purpose. Some social media platforms naturally conform to what have been called deviant cyber communities. The defining element of these communities is, in turn, what is known as courtship disorder. And I guess Ashley Madison is a place where you can find a partner for an affair. The courtship disorder describes a high-risk and generally deviant approach to courtship practices that is informed and influenced by paraphilias. In a parallel sexually deviant fantasy world, men with paraphilia develop sexual relationships with their victims who they have been fantasized about. This is in stark contrast to consensual relationships that are born out of healthy, normal sexual fantasies and are socially acceptable. Stalking describes the unwanted and potentially dangerous pursuit or surveillance of a victim by an obsessed or disordered subject. The 4 Los Angeles Police Department categories are as follows: the simple obsessional, describes cases where the victim knows their stalker and where the stalking behavior includes invasive surveillance or repeated contact, reflects a disordered response to a rejection, whether real or perceived. And this is typically a male offender. Some people refer to them as creepers. Love obsessional describes cases where the victim does not know their stalker and where the stalking behavior includes invasive surveillance or repeated contact, reflects the stalker's paraphilic attempt to draw attention to themselves. They're believing that the feelings will be reciprocated. And this is typically a male offender again. Erotomanic describes cases where the victim does not know their stalker and where the victim is typically a person in the public eye who is easily located at a workplace or through social media, and the offender is a deranged fan. And this happens to both males and female offenders. This is a picture of Eva LaRue. She was on CSI Miami. She had a stalker for 12 years. They couldn't figure out who it was. The police departments tried to find it. This is her daughter. Her daughter just turned 17. When her daughter was 7 years old, the stalker started including the daughter in the threats to Miss LaRue. They just caught him like last month. Some guy out of Ohio was so obsessed with Eva LaRue that he decided he would harass her and her daughter, strangely enough. Another case, David Letterman had a female stalker who would break into his house. Eventually, she committed suicide at his property in New Jersey. I guess he was living in Connecticut. I guess he was in Connecticut. He had a house in Connecticut, and he was filming every night from New York. She committed suicide just outside his property. As weird as that is, it was kind of unnerving what people will do. Anyway, this is Eva LaRue, and like I said, they just caught her stalker last week. False victimization syndrome describes cases where the victim creates or imagines being stalked and even accuses another person of stalking them as a matter of attention seeking or to mitigate feelings of loneliness and isolation. And this is usually a female offender. The superstalker is also a dangerous byproduct of social media's network effect. For their own gain, they are able to assume and imagine or any image and approach to lure victims into compliance. The new breed of cyberstalker does not have to arrive at your victim's doorstep, show their face, and openly declare their intention. All they have to do is profile the victim and offer them what they think the victim needs. And that is the end of the chapter. Like I said, it's kind of an ugly chapter, but it's one that we need to think about. Okay, so I'll talk to you guys next week.